going on, guys? This is Jay here. Thanks for checking out my channel. This is Faith Evolved, where I talk about all things spiritual, metaphysical, philosophical, and mental health. And if it's your first time here, I want to say thank you very much for joining me today. Please do check out the video section. And if what I have to say here resonates, I would certainly be humbly appreciative of your subscription. Please like the videos. Click the notification bell so you get notified anytime I release any new videos. Share the video on social media and comment below. I like to read your comments and respond whenever I can. So what I want to talk about today is actually, believe it or not, my band Edolus' latest release called Fate. Yeah, we just dropped it on October 31st on all music streaming platforms. It's a cross between power metal and death metal. It's very melodic, and in my opinion, it's probably up there as one of the best metal releases of this year. And I say that with no conceit. I say that as someone who literally all I do is show up and sing, and I offer a couple suggestions on maybe how things are, performed, maybe or sang, but I can't claim any credit for the writing of this. This is, a lot of times Connor Logan, who's the bass player, he comes up with some riffs or a couple of riffs and sends it off to all of us, and Alex will take it and completely morph it into something absolutely epic and amazing. And I'm just so grateful and humbled to be part of this project. And I want to thank, of course, everybody in the band for entrusting me with the lead vocal spot. And we've been together for over 3 years now, almost 3.5 years. This is our second EP. We've had a couple singles and another EP before. We're doing a Christmas song now. That's going to be fun. But why am I doing this on this channel instead of my personal channel? Well, because I think there's something much, much deeper behind the meaning of the album Fate to me. And I never shared this with the rest of the guys in the band, and I didn't talk to them beforehand about it. And I don't think I really have to, and I don't think they expect me to, but this is going to be a very, very respectful video. But here it is, edolusband.com. The new EP Fate dropped on all music streaming platforms. And Fate, it's very, it's very pertinent to me. It hits home for me because, although it's a concept album, it's ultimately it's music. It's not meant to be taken super seriously and literally, but at the same time, I think it speaks to something a lot deeper, at least for me, and maybe for other people, who might be struggling with philosophical topics and concepts. But I'll break down the story, behind this concept album. So imagine you're a hero, or you're a traveler, and it's like maybe like 1400s, 1500s, like some kind of, medieval time period. And I don't know if I have the right time frame for medieval, but just think of a medieval time frame. You're walking through the woods, maybe you had some amazing exploits in your life of, victories over your enemies, and, saving, your townspeople from getting destroyed by neighboring tribes or whatever the case may be. But you're a hero walking through the woods. You've had a long and hard life, but you feel like, it was worth living. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this celestial being just pops in front of you while you're sitting at a campfire, and she's looking down on you, saying, with kind of like tears in her eyes, saying, "I'm very sorry, but I have to let you know that you're gonna die, and it's because of something I did, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I, the entity, am powerless to stop this from happening. It's just a matter of time before you will die. So kind of make peace with your life and your family and friends, or whatever the case may be." And then she disappears, and then the protagonist, the hero, whatever, is left sitting there like bewildered, like, what do you mean I'm gonna die? No, you won't take me. That's the whole idea of the song "You Won't Take Me." It was a single we dropped, and it's about him being in denial about this whole situation of his fate of death and nothing he can do about it. And then it goes on to fighting fate, where he goes through this process of many years. He goes to at one point to try to seek help from an oracle or something. Comes up empty-handed. There's no answer. There's no way to get out of his fate. He's gonna fight it anyways. But at the very end of that process, that day comes. No matter what he did, no matter what he tried to do to prevent that from happening, he looks up into the sky, and black hole opens up. We call it the dark star abyss, and he gets sucked into this black hole while he looks there with a sad look in her face. And that's the cover art of the Edolus Fate album. He's getting sucked into this dark star abyss. And then in Mortal Fall, he talks about how he's kind of reflecting that as he's dying, and gets kind of into this place where he's like in this like still like ocean like realm where he's just kind of floating around in his afterlife, if you will, or his the void of non-existence, whatever you want to call it. But he's there, and he comes to peace with it, and he forgives the entity for what she did, because of her cosmic meddling. He has to suffer this fate, but he comes to peace with it, comes to terms with it, and it kind of ends on a good note. But it does leave a few questions, and it's meant to be like that. You know how a really really good movie or a good series at the very end of it. Not only is it awesome, it's a great story, it's riveting, some good character development, but at the very end it leaves you going, but what next? Or is there more? My son listened to it, and he, was like, oh, it's only 28 minutes and change. I wish it was longer, and then, of course, me, because Connor came up with the idea, he came up with the topic and the concept of this concept album. And I said, so what did she do? What was it that she did that caused it to be that she couldn't stop the fact that he's going to die, this horrible fate, and get sucked into a dark star, and be left into this void of nothingness? And the answer is there is no answer. It's just it's not, the answer's not there. The reason's not given. It's just this is what happens. There's nothing she can do about it. And that kind of leaves me with this kind of sense of unanswered questions. There's loose ends here. There's it's not there's something, it's like, oh, it's cliffhanger, or like, it's like when you're playing an instrument, and you stop on the wrong note. You expect there to be resolution. There's no resolution. Besides the fact he's at peace with it, but which I think is, it's good enough of a resolution for me, but it does kind of leave those questions of existential anxiety and worry about our existence. For me, anyways, it does have a deeper meaning, because I personally have gone through what I call the dark night of the soul, where I did suffer some extremely, intense, really tormenting thoughts and feelings and emotions around the time of when I got divorced in 2019 and moved to Virginia. I went through a horrible, deep, dark depression, panic attacks, the worst kind of anxiety, and just the deepest, darkest emotions I would never wish on my worst enemy, OCD, everything. And, just going through that. And, I remember praying to God, and, praying to the universe and angels, whomever would help me in this moment of desperation. And I just remember there was no answer. There's no, there was no prayer that I prayed that healed me on the spot, that got me through that moment. Now, I think as I look back, of course, I do feel, that I'm stronger because of it, and I overcame a lot of negative thought patterns, and I'm able to, stave off a panic attack. I'm able to, handle these kind of deep dark thoughts and what if questions and existential dread and all this stuff much better now, having gone through that. Would I ever want to go through it again? Hell no. Would I wish it on my worst enemy? Hell no. Do I think it's necessary to go through that to develop your character in life? Hell no. But I definitely think there's some value to it now looking back. But just being in it, when you're in the dark night of the soul, there is no hope. There is no answer. There is no one coming to, giving you that that peace, or that hope for the future. You're in complete despair. And that's kind of like what this album, the concept album, reminded me of. Like, there are going to be moments in life where you're given no reason and no hope. You just have to kind of sit with that pain. And I did have a good friend named Christian Sundberg, who I still talk to from time to time on Facebook. But he helped me through that dark night of the soul. He's one of many people that helped me through. But, he told me, you just got to sit with that pain. You got to deal with it. Don't fight it. Let it, just even let it try to destroy you. Let that pain destroy you. Or at least feel like it's going to destroy you. And the more you sit there and just sit with that pain, you realize that it's not going to destroy you. It can't destroy you. No matter how bleak, no matter how much despair you're going through, it cannot destroy you. You're still going to be there at the end. And that's almost kind of like this whole concept. And granted, Connor and maybe a couple other folks in my band, this wasn't intended to be a spiritual concept per se, and so it wasn't meant to be that. But I think it's cool that this kind of album it kind of can relate to anybody, whether you're atheist or agnostic or Christian or spiritual like myself. It can have a message for anybody, that even in a situation where something's completely out of your control, and not only that, it's out of the control of the person who's causing it, you can still get through that, and come to peace, come to terms with that. And it just, it really hits home because fate for me and a spirit, and maybe for other people there is no spiritual correlation, but for me it has a major spiritual correlation with my life. I feel like it's almost ordained. It's almost like poetic, or in a lot of ways cathartic, and in a lot of ways just very almost like spiritually, like it's almost like it has some kind of like spiritual inspiration behind it, whether it's intended to or not, at least for me. And I think that, it'll get a lot of people thinking that regardless of your fate, you can still, come to peace with it. And it's not the end. And even this, whether, even though it's not really a religious concept or a spiritual concept, even after he goes through that dark star abyss, he's born again. He's floating along in the sea of nothingness and at peace with his situation. And a lot of times I think to myself, the only reason that death would be scary is if it really was the end. But even in that case, if it was really the end, you wouldn't be afraid anyways, because you wouldn't be around to experience it. So either, in my opinion, I can't prove this, of course, but there's only going to be two things that happen. Either you die and you're gone forever, or you die and you move on to some other form or some other, dimension or something. There's only going to be two options. And if death is real and you're gone, snuffed out of existence, well, you can't be around to experience that. You can't experience not experiencing. You can't experience, death. Really, you're gone. You're snuffed out. So there's nothing to fear. And if there is something else, then hey, it's a bonus. At least that's how I would spin it to anybody who's kind of like on the fence about the afterlife and do we persist after death. So there's really nothing to fear about death. Really, my only fear is am I going to suffer pain before then? That's another whole conversation that we'll talk about in another episode. But yeah, I just wanted to let folks know. You can check it out on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, whatever, Bandcamp, even social media. Please check out Edolus's new EP, Fate. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks and God bless.